I'm not a rock star. But I'm happy to be here, even though had I have had a chance to make a different decision, I would be on the other room where there's no communication. The Stack Overflow guys are explaining the architecture. But anyway, 50 minutes for just a couple of things, very basic and simple things. First, one communication. Mobile is dead. Please start back. And a demo of how you can start back today on the whole mobile thing, planning multi-device websites. And the demo that will take a few minutes to come is a demo that uses surprisingly simple, familiar technologies. Nothing more than a smart use of the only feature in ASP.NET MVC 4 that, in my opinion, really justifies the jump from any other older version. So I'm still using Visual Studio 2010. For the most sites that I manage, I'm still using MVC 3 for some of them. And the only reason, regardless of the marketing, bundling, minification, this, that, web API, the only reason that, in my humble opinion, justifies MVC 4 and superior is the feature called display modes that I'm going to use in the demo later today to give you concrete hints actually, on how to plan multi-device websites. But 50 minutes is not, in general, a huge amount of time for a presentation. And speakers, in this case, tend to be nice to the audience and say, well, we have limited time, so let me go straight to the point. But 3 seconds later, they say, well, but before we start, I want to give you an overview of this. I want to make sure that you have enough background on that. I want to give you a quick refresher of this. I'm no exception. So, but I will start from the very, very, very beginning. So I will start from the history of the mobile arc and what was life after the mobile flood. So in this story, in the genesis of the mobile world, at some point on a planet called mobile, life was like this. There was a fragmentation of devices. There was a huge, humongous number of devices and people and developers trying to build websites against. To the point that the God Lord of mobile saw how great fragmentation had become and decided to wipe mobile phones from the face of the earth. But he wanted to save something. So it found in the world one righteous man among all the other people and found some favor in this man. We call this man WURFL. So God instructed WURFL to bring into the ark, to build the ark and then bring into the ark one of all mobile devices he had been using and knowing. So basically, this is the picture of the classic Noah ark. Instead of the animals, we have devices now, and the name is different. So instead of the Noah ark is now the WURFL mobile arks. Nicely enough, I picked up this picture because the face of Noah here is just like the face depicted of the guy, Luca Passani, behind the WURFL project. Anyway, rain, the story, rain fell on the earth for days and nights, the waters flooded the earth, every mobile device was wiped out. And as waters receded, WURFL and his repository of devices continued to wait for months. So, unused, still there. Until something called responsive web design gained the spotlight. Then, at that point, the righteous man, WURFL, built, like, for fun, a website, and he was able, surprisingly, to support all devices he had kept in the ark. God visited the site and said that the site was good. God established then a covenant with a good man called WURFL and said, never again will there be a flood to destroy devices and websites built with the devices in the ark. If you do things right. This was the hidden thought of the Lord God. And as a sign of this everlasting covenant, God set a rainbow in the clouds and also forced WURFL to move to the cloud. Okay, now, mobile is over. All this to say that, as I say things, mobile is over. This is now, it's over because this is the era of devices. And the term devices and whatever we can attach to this concept is something that fully replaces mobile. Mobile means nothing. Mobile what? Mobile can be a smartphone, can be a tablet, but can also be a mini tablet, can be a smart TV, can be a large screen, can be a computer, a classic PC, can be everything. So the dichotomy, classic website, so desktop website, and mobile makes no sense anymore. Mobile what, again? This is the point, essentially. So upgrade from the idea of basic dichotomy, what runs on anything I can use on the go, and what runs on a computer I can work with comfortably sitting. This kind of dichotomy makes no sense anymore, and the sooner you realize this, and the sooner you organize yourself to play with better tools, or simply to understand the basics of the problem, the sooner the better. I'm a web developer. That's the problem. And because I'm a web developer, I'm smart. And because I'm smart, as a web developer, I think that I could write mobile sites regardless of the capabilities, the characteristics, the features of the devices where my website will actually run. I mean, this is apparently a good point. I'm smart because I'm able to write websites that can work regardless of the device. Who cares? Is it a large TV screen? Is it a small smartphone? It is a large smartphone? It's a mini tablet? It's a big tablet? Who cares? My website still works regardless because I'm smart, because I'm a smart web developer, and because I follow the guidelines of illuminated web gurus. And sometimes I screw it up. So this is the point. And this is, we can call it a controversial point, but I mean, there is much more than this to that. It's a fundamental point because I believe, and if I'm wrong, it doesn't matter. I believe that in a couple of years, every single website on the face of the planet Earth, not to cause problems with the Lord God of mobile and cause another ark to be created, every website needs to have a mobile counterpart. So which means it needs to show up nicely on whatever kind of device will be used to visit the site. For customers, it will be no longer acceptable to open on a smartphone www.whateverit.com and have to zoom in and out, pinch and do weird gestures in order to do a login. It will be unacceptable that to connect to the Wi-Fi here, I have to zoom and then the Kraków, whatever it is, the password and so forth. It's unacceptable today to a few people. It will be unacceptable to everybody in, well, let's say 2 years, whatever. It's a matter of business. It's a matter of business. So, not a mobile developer written in stone, not a mobile developer, not an illuminated mobile developer, not a developer anymore, period. Okay, well, you can open a pizzeria. It works anyway. You can open a restaurant. It works. But not in development anymore. So, you probably have figured out already that I'm not really a big fan of responsive web design, which is true. But I do have, anyway, a high opinion of responsive web design. So I'm here to kill responsive web design, actually. But I do recognize that it's a great thing, except that it has very little to do with the reason why we are here today, talking mobile. So responsive web design is a great approach. It runs on top of great technologies. But essentially, technologies are not mobile friendly. It's a great feature if you resize the browser window. I mean, I tried myself to build something that was that can be considered an embryo of what we call today responsive web design back in the 90s. As soon as Microsoft put out the DOM, the dynamic HTML, the dynamic DOM with Internet Explorer 4 in 97. When I showed, I remember very well, when I showed to some people, not publicly, just in my office, the fact that you could resize the window magically, blocks in the page were taking and docking to the right place, they said, oh, it's nice, but no, but who cares? It was great 10 years, 15 years ago. It's great today. But again, it has nothing to do with the core, with the real issues we are facing and we must be ready to face when it comes to building sites for, in general, applications for devices. So responsive web design aims at crafting sites to provide an optimal viewing experience. Fine, perfect. But the key is viewing experience, which is exactly what you need if your device is a PC. If your device starts getting something different than a PC, and usually in this case, the example is a tablet or a smartphone. I want to make another example. Suppose that you want to have an optimal viewing experience on a large TV screen, on a smart TV, on an Xbox, whatever, on a large TV screen, okay? You have the Windows 8 effect. Empty space and something small, and an horizontal bar in the middle to scroll endlessly. You probably don't want this. You probably want to be able to take advantage of the square meter you have, of screen you have. You want probably to be able to see different pieces of information and different channel of information displayed on the same screen, so that the real TV maybe, along with a window or a vertical bar that shows Twitter. You're looking at a TV show and you want to see what people think about that. You want to be able to see at the same time a Facebook window and post your comments live. Or maybe you want to have on the same very large screen half TV and half web browser. And if we were talking about, applications, you might want to have, for example, some application from Xbox or even a specialized website that allows you to Flickr or Pinterest, something that shows pictures, and you want to be able to, have a bar somewhere that allows you to connect to an online shop and order prints of those pictures. I mean, I'm just, thinking broadly, and my point is, depending on the area of the screen you have available, the use cases, that's another key word, the use cases of the application, the website, whatever it is, can be significantly different. But the difference goes in both directions. If this is the classic regular desktop, this can grow bigger and also smaller. So it's bidirectional. And the size of the screen makes the use cases. I do recognize that a tablet, an iPad, and a regular monitor, PC monitor, no big deal. It's more or less the same. It's more or less the same. So you can probably use the same use cases, the same graphics, the same design. But when it gets bigger or smaller, so smartphone or smart TV, that makes a huge difference starting from the regular PC. On a smartphone, it's a 40-inch screen, more or less, versus 13, 15-inch. Physics or mathematics, numbers are not an opinion. So it makes a huge difference. You cannot believe that you can stuff in the same small area of the screen of a smartphone the same amount of information that you can stuff on a PC screen. You say, yes, but with CSS, with responsive web design, I can reorder, I can reflow the information. Yes, sure, okay. It works, and responsive web design is great, but there's another aspect. Performance, bandwidth, network latency. I invite you to, because I have no time, I invite you to visit a website http Microsoft msdn.microsoft.com. I think it's vStudio or something like that. I'm not sure this is the right side. Anyway, okay. Probably it's not this one, but it's another one because it appears there's a menu button that appears when you restrict the size. But anyway, let's suppose that this website is correctly working with responsive web design template. The problem is, if you do something as simple as changing the user agent string here using the developer toolbar of Internet Explorer, right? And you set it to be something like, okay, HTC Desire or whatever smartphone you want, iPhone, whatever. And then you refresh F5, making sure that from the cache menu here, you set always refresh from server. So this means you have the numbers, you have the weight, the real weight of the home page. Well, you will be surprised to see that there's nearly no difference in the actual download, whether you are using the regular Internet Explorer user agent string or the smartphone, a smartphone user agent string. So responsive web design makes no difference. It doesn't recognize the device. It just recognizes the size of the screen. So having a window resized like this to be more or less the size of a smartphone and having the full screen for a responsive website is exactly the same. But it's not the same for users, because one thing is downloading 3 megs, and this 3 megs is more or less the size of the website I championed, which is not this one here anyway. ASP.NET probably, yeah, it could be. Yeah, it could be. Yep. Yep. So, for use, one thing is viewing this website on a PC. It's a completely different experience on something like this. Okay, this is still called a smartphone, but it's a 3-year-old phone. But it's still, it's still a phone that is, used. But even if you take modern smartphones, well, 3 megs is 3 megs is not a big deal if you are using if the website is using all of it. But I don't know how many of you are really familiar with responsive web design. But responsive web design works adapting the layout of the page to the host environment, and it does that using proportion-based grids. Essentially, it uses, instead of physical numbers for dimension and size of fonts, it uses percentages. It uses CSS3 media queries. And if very well done, it can use some services from the Filament group, an HTTP handler that serves images, doing on the server side something that recognizes whether the big or the small image, it's not really granular, has to be served. In this way, you can even resize images being served and save a little bit of bandwidth. But the key, the heart of responsive web design is CSS3 media queries. And now, CSS3 media queries is about 5 properties. It's a smart idea. The browser picks up the CSS that is most appropriate for the current scenario. So you say, because you're a smart developer, you say, well, the browser is smart enough. I define my business rules. I define, take this CSS if the screen size is in this range, in this range, in this range. Fine. You define, what are called breakpoints, 480, 780 typically pixels, 1200 pixels, and more. And then you can add as many breakpoints as you like. It's beautiful. Effectively, you can have an optimized view experience on smartphones for the same site, and you write the site only once. Except that you are completely unable to make to go beyond what the engine behind CSS3 media queries provide. And media queries allows you to write query expressions to select the CSS file to apply, but you only have 5 properties, probably 1 property, screen width. You have a device width, screen width. The difference is device is the full screen. Width is just the window width, which makes a difference. It makes no difference on mobiles. It makes a difference on PCs. You have orientation, which is important. Landscape or portrait. Or you have other funny things like colors. And height, which probably nobody ever used. You have nothing in CSS3 media queries like the operating system. So you have no way to to separate iPhones from Androids and maybe use a CSS that is specific to each. No way. So yes, you can have one code base, multiple CSS files, smart idea, as long as it doesn't care. It is not important for you to build a really optimized experience. And like it or not, there's no way to work around this. Because the engine that you are relying on is limited. And don't think that the CSS4 media queries, which adds more properties, still doesn't address effectively the problem. Okay, so to use this picture coming from hacks.mozilla.org, this illustrates, I think, very, very well what is the point about responsive web design. It's just the tip of the iceberg You see, it's nice, it's smart, it's great, it's fantastic, and it works, actually. But you miss completely a number of other issues. Performance, conditional loading, feature detection, and many more. So, what else? And why I'm here? There is a little bit of confusion between expressions like UI, user agent sniffing, feature detection, device detection. Let me give you definitions. Feature detection is what Modernizer does, or what you do when you use Modernizer. And it's exactly what makes us feel so smart, because we detect and we use it only if allowed, only if it's there. Sure, it works, but we are still talking about features we can check on the client. Today, there's no way to check the operating system on the client in a reliable way. There is a window.navigator.maybe.os, but it just returns Windows on Windows Phone. It's not supported on all browsers. It's only reliable if you want to recognize iOS. On Android, it returns Linux. So this may or may not be good enough for you. It depends on what are your purposes. What are you really trying to accomplish? But you cannot consider feature detection a reliable way of building multi-device websites. Developers hate anything that brings back to the server side and to analyzing browser capabilities because of the bad memories of the browser hell, the browser wars, when for 5 or 6 different browsers, we had to build sometimes 5 or 6 different versions, because Safari was different from Netscape, which was different from Netscape 4, which was different from IE4, and so forth. User agent sniffing is still something you do on the client when you essentially apply some smart tricks. One could be checking the navigator.os property, or when you do regular expressions and analyze the user agent, just trying to check whether the word Android or the word iPhone or the word iPad or the word GT dash substrings, magic substrings, are contained there. You know that GT dash indicates it's a Galaxy tab. iPhone means iPhone, iPod, iPad, whatever means what they are supposed to mean. And you are right, because you think, well, this is not really going to be a reliable algorithm. I don't feel confident in building my logic on top of this flaky background. And you're right. That's why user agent sniffing doesn't work. And what remains for websites that must be, because that's a strong business requirement oriented to business, is doing device detection. Device detection, and WURFL is the de facto standard tool and library for this kind of thing. It still uses the user agent. It still gets the user agent string as well as HTTP headers coming with the request, and it uses this information as a key to make a query on an indexed DB, and just extracts a record that contains up to 600 known capabilities. Known capabilities, not physically detected. But it means that behind device detection, there is a database which is called DDR, Device Description Repository. There is a bunch of people who regularly, weekly, update the database, taking into account the new user agent strings, and evolve the set of capabilities for each device. WURFL currently manages more than 15,000 devices, and this number grows. Actually, well, yeah, more than 15,000, and the number is growing. It grows every week. Microsoft releases Internet Explorer 11, the device is added. Google Glass starts getting available. People may start thinking to build pages optimized for Google Glass, okay, fine. The user agent is found, analyzed, capabilities detected, and a new record is added to the DB. This is a service, it's a commercial, professional service that essentially is produces a database of known capabilities. So there is expertise that knows that a device does that. The last change that we made to the WURFL database, just we have still to release the latest API. Essentially, we stopped considering WURFL. I'm sorry. We stopped considering Symbian devices as smartphones because after tests, it turns out that Symbian devices perform poorly on responsive websites. And yeah, we're led to consider that, if you want to call it a smartphone, it has to perform decently well on responsive websites. So Symbian have been marked in the WURFL database as not smartphones. Oh, I'm sorry. This comes with the next API in just a few days. So this is to say that there's a bunch of people working on this and keeping updated the database. Okay, let me show you now how it works. And I'm just be using ASP.NET MVC4 and the WURFL library together. Visual Studio is over here. This is my demo. Multi-device, okay. Let me first show you what I mean in action. What you see. Okay, so it's Chrome or... Yeah, there it is. Okay. It detected that it is running on a desktop browser, and it says, well, I'm sorry, this demo application has no predefined page for desktop browser. So try with a mobile or a tablet browser. So now, because I don't know how to, I'm not really familiar with Chrome, let me switch back to Internet Explorer. Only because I know how to use the F12 tool, the toolbar. That's the only reason. Okay, so now I say, look, now let's pretend that you are an HTC Desire, which is the user agent of my smartphone, Android smartphone. Let me take this more or less to the size, to the size of a smartphone, something like that. Let me drop this, F5. And this is the UI that you get. The URL is exactly the same. I'm still on the home page of my application. But now, I want to say, okay, let me make this larger, more or less as a tablet. Let me also reduce this to 75%. Go back to F12. And say, look, now, let's pretend you are an iPad. Refresh, and this is a slightly different UI. And I can also do, well, what if instead I tell you that you are a very basic cell phone? It now looks like this. Apparently, it's the same basic principle behind responsive web design. And actually, it works the same way, except that everything takes place on the server. Instead of having multiple CSS files, we are having multiple Razor files, assuming that we are talking about an MVC application. The Razor file is just a separate, distinct view, which can have, why not, specific CSS. And the logic of the website is exactly the same. But you have new power here. that you cannot have otherwise with responsive web design. If you decide one day that you want to replace the view, say, of a tablet, and introduce new use cases, new buttons, new functions, new features, just a completely different way of reorganizing the information. You just replace a razor file. Need more logic? Okay, we are talking about application logic, right? So we are talking about the piece of code you call from within the controller. So you don't need probably to add new controllers to your app, but you probably need to add new classes, new methods to the application layer, which, however, still talks to the same domain layer where you have the business logic. So the application logic is what makes a UI unique. It's the implementation of use cases. So if you had use cases, reasonably you want to have more code. But if you are still talking about only talking about having different ways of moving things around, well, you just have multiple razor files. And because this takes place on the server, you control exactly what gets downloaded. You can minimize the things. You can serve the image as small as it should be. If you drop, as usually happens on smartphones, 80% of the features, you save probably 80% of the download, of the data, of the markup, of the whatever it is that you happen to download. So with responsive web design, what users see is, probably a small chunk of what is downloaded, but the download is still paid. So you download to hide things. Not really smart, even for web developers, right? Okay, and to finish off, let me just show you what it takes to have this code working. The project here, multi-device, is a regular MVC application, MVC4 application. It only has, the only weird thing it has is a NuGet package for WURFL. And once you have installed the NuGet, the WURFL package, okay, it takes ages. You have the database. The database is not guaranteed to be up to date. You need a commercial license to get the weekly build. What you get with the NuGet package is the most up-to-date database at the time when the package was published. We're going to publish a new package probably next week. Then when you get the database, you can put the database typically in app data, but it can stay on your server, whatever you like. You have a couple of libraries to reference, WURFL and ASP.NET extensions. And then the web config file is slightly manipulated, okay, to define a custom section and to put in the custom section essentially the path to the database. This happens automatically as you install the NuGet package. Beyond that, on Globalize X, you initialize the library. Okay, I created a class here, but it's one line of code. Essentially this. You call the WURFL Manager Builder, and you pass the application configurer, which essentially is a wrapper class that reads from the config file. There is another class in the API, in-memory configurer, if you want to programmatically set where the database is located, and other parameters can be configured as well. Beyond that, that's enough for WURFL now. You need, however, because it's MVC4, you need to enable a native feature of MVC that allows view routing. So essentially, the mechanism which is native in MVC, it has nothing to do with WURFL. The mechanism that allows you to define for a given logical page multiple views. And this is what happens here in this display config, which is a custom piece of code. And here you are using and seeing in action display modes, the feature that I love most in MVC 4. Basically, a display mode in MVC is basically the combination of a string that identifies a nickname for the name of the view mode and a context condition. So if the condition is verified, then the message is to the view engine, picks up, instead of, say, index CHTML, picks up index.name.cshtml. And here, what you're doing is essentially you are defining the types, the numbers, and the types of views and the devices you want to support. So I'm saying, look, the default display mode has no string, so the razor file is has, it should be, so index.extension, home.extension, and so forth. And you pick up that particular razor file if this condition is true. If on the request, classic ASP.NET request object, the extension method called isDesktop returns true. But more importantly, I define a smartphone, and this is a string, you can use any name you want there. If the isSmartphone method on the request object, an extension method, returns true, and so forth for tablet and for legacy. And then once I defined the various display modes, I just empty the display mode native collection of ASP.NET, and I just add in the order I like and I need the new display modes. By default, ASP.NET MVC comes with two predefined display modes, desktop and mobile. And if it's not desktop, regardless of the device, it will pick up the mobile view. That's why I said mobile is over, look into multi-device design. Okay, what else is essentially taking a look into these extension methods? These are extension methods that are defined in the project. Request extensions. So isDesktop just returns true. IsLegacy, isSmartphone, isTablet, they just call into helpers. In particular, let's focus on isSmartphone. Here we go. And here we make use of WURFL. Because now, from the user agent that we've got from the request, we say, look, Lord WURFL, from your current instance, please get me device information for this user agent. And we got back an iDevice object. iDevice is an internal WURFL type. Now, in the version that we will release probably next week, you can do just this. There's a new method, getVirtual capability, and there is a new capability called isSmartphone, and the logic is the logic that is hard-coded in the WURFL library that tells you, okay, this is a smartphone. According to our best knowledge, this is a smartphone. But otherwise, today, or in alternative, you can write yourself the logic that decides if a user agent is a smartphone or not. And this is an excerpt of the logic that in version 1.5 the library uses internally. So it has to be a wireless. It doesn't have to be a tablet. It needs to have touch capabilities. And the operating system has to be Android at least 2.1 or iPhone at least 3.2, Windows Phone at least 7.1, RIM at least 6, and that's your logic. But this is an excerpt of the logic we are using right now. So if this expression returns true, okay, you decided that this user agent maps to a smartphone. So is a smartphone here returns true, and then in the views folder, this view index.smartphone.cshtml is picked up instead of index, and in other scenarios, index legacy, index tablet, whatever, is picked up. You have total freedom of defining as many display modes you like. So it's trivial at this point to have views for iOS, for any iOS device. and you only need to, I don't know, add here another extension method is iOS, and internally it could simply be device, could be simply be this line here, or just device as iOS version 1.0. But there is a lot more than this, because WURFL is not, of course, limited to telling you reliably what is the operating system. By the way, WURFL doesn't tell you the installed operating system on that particular device. If for some weird reason, when you upgrade the firmware, when you upgrade to a newer version, typically on Android, usually the user agent of the native browser is changed. But there are some devices, we experienced that with an Italian-made and a Chinese-made devices. There might be exceptions where this doesn't happen. I also personally worked with an Android devices that sends out exactly the same user agent string as an iPad. So, you see, this is an Android, but the browser, the user agent is the same as the first iPad. So in these cases, you understand that there's not much that tools can do, because the user agent is still the only piece of information that you have to process. Everybody will be fooled. But beyond that, once the user agent is reliable, you can have up to 600 capabilities. And to give an idea, let me show you the output of this application that is the sample app that comes with a WURFL package. The list of capabilities is, okay, in this case is restricted to product info and resolution width. Contains information, for example, can assign phone number, which basically tells you whether the device can be used as a phone, as a cell phone. So if it can host a SIM and make calls. So you can reach this level of granularity as far as details is concerned. But you have information about videos, streaming capabilities, HTML5 rendering capabilities, and even whether the database reckons that the device can support advanced UI HTML5 frameworks like Sencha. I've seen too many apps, too many projects fail that were supposed to use Sencha Touch to build the beautiful HTML5 experience, fail because they could only run nicely and effectively on latest Galaxies and iPhones. The customer wanted, paid for a much wider, broader support of a wider range of devices, and the customer, too many times I've seen myself, was disappointed, and the team had to switch to find other solutions. WURFL will tell you also whether it's reckoned that the device will work with advanced frameworks and the level of support for HTML5. Okay. This MSDN link points to an article which went online, I think, a few weeks ago. And you can consider that article basically the transcript of this session. And from there you can get the demo that I showed. If you're interested in WURFL, WURFLSourceForge.net is the official website. For commercial information, scienziamobile.com/products. Just 2 words if you're interested in WURFL. In first place, notice that WURFL is used by Google and Facebook. Behind the websites, the mobile websites of Facebook, there is WURFL. And this news is public, so if you Google WURFL Facebook, you get links. In Google, it's the same, except that there is no public announcement that Google made. Also, Akamai, but I'm not revealing any trade secret by saying that. These are the biggest customers that are using WURFL. WURFL is an open source project, so it means that for open source projects, it's free. It's also free to develop commercial websites, but in that case, before you go in production, because you go live, a commercial license is required, because technically the open source license is AGPL, which essentially means it's free for open source projects, requires a commercial license for everything else, but at least you don't have the problem of developing. It's free to develop, so when you go live, when you go on production, you might want to give a call to the guys. WURFL, for what it matters, is also available for nearly any programming platform, so it ranges from Java to PHP to C++, and I'm the guy behind the ASP.NET version. Thank you. Any question? I'm here, and around, yes. Is free? Get it. If it's free, it's not what I know, but if it's free, no problem. WURFL is not free. And now there's a nice story about 51 Degrees and WURFL, because I knew about WURFL because of 51 Degrees. Because I knew WURFL, the project WURFL, because I know very well the guy behind the project. He was a close friend of mine. And he mentioned that he was starting this project about 10 years ago. And then a couple of years ago, I was writing an article on 51 Degrees because it looked like a nice thing. And I said, it's based on WURFL. But where did I hear this name already? And then I figured out things. And at the same time, they were, they couldn't find a commercial agreement at the time. So essentially, now they are plain competitors. And the 51 Degrees essentially rebuilt completely from scratch their own database. But they worked on WURFL, on the WURFL data for at least a couple of years. So, they are competitors. So, if it's free, I don't know. What I can tell you that I mentioned, WURFL is also available on the cloud. So you pay per hit. And as far as I know, if you take no more than 2 properties, it's free as well. Two capabilities. So if you pick up 2 capabilities of your choice, WURFL on the cloud, which doesn't ensure the same performance, because you have to go to the cloud instead of staying or going to your web server, it's free anyway. It's also free. Check out the cloud offering on WURFL, but you are limited on the capabilities, which I assume it's the same kind of contract, basically, that you get from. I don't know more than this anyway. Yes.
I remember a couple of years ago there was a problem with several network operators in UK who started putting proxies on their gateways, so that every device from inside their network had their headers manipulate also the user agent, and that involved a kind of war between WURFL authors and this network operators. Is it the case anymore?
Yeah, I was aware of this kind of problems. A couple of years ago, I think that we put some logic into the machinery of WURFL to try to normalize user agents, but I'm not the right person to answer precisely your question. It's a known problem, what you mentioned, but we have a complex logic of normalization just to try to get rid of this kind of issues, but I don't know the reliability of our current approach.